My name is Noah. I was 5 years old when a fire took my parents away and divided my life into two parts. Before that night and everything that followed. In a few burning hours, I lost more than a house. I lost the warmth that tucked me in, the gentle voices that called my name, the arms that made the world feel safe. After the funeral, when the flowers had wilted and the visitors had gone home, I was sent to live with my uncle. He said he had no choice. He already had 3 sons, and I was simply another burden, another plate at the table, another shadow in the corner of a crowded room. They gave me the attic. It was a narrow, cold space with no window and no heater. The roof groaned at night, and the wind slipped through thin cracks in the wood. An old mattress lay on the floor, its springs uneven beneath my back. The stairs leading up to it creaked loudly, as if even the house complained about my presence. Downstairs, my cousins slept in warm beds with thick blankets. They had toys, jackets, and bowls of dessert after dinner. I had silence, dust, and clothes that once belonged to someone else. They reminded me often that I was not truly family. They pushed my plate away at meals and laughed when I tried to join their games. They hid my shoes and once locked the front door when I came home late from school. I knocked for an hour before anyone answered. No one asked if I was hungry. No one checked whether I had finished my homework. They only wanted me quiet and invisible. So I became quiet. I became small. But inside that small body lived a stubborn light. I kept my books close and my hopes even closer. Every night I read whatever I could find. Old newspapers, torn novels, science magazines rescued from the trash. I did not have toys, but I had curiosity. While others imagined cars and video games, I imagined hospitals. I imagined standing beside a bed and telling someone they would be all right. At school, I sat in the front row. I raised my hand for every question and listened carefully to every lesson. Other children carried colorful lunchboxes and wore polished shoes. I brought plain bread wrapped in paper, but I never complained. Knowledge became my shelter. When teachers praised my answers, I carried their words home like hidden treasure. One winter, I fell ill with a fever. I lay in the attic for 3 days alone. No one brought soup. No one placed a hand on my forehead. Wrapped in old blankets, I whispered the stories my mother once told me. I remembered her laughter, her soft voice calling me brave even when we had nothing but dreams. That memory became my lantern in the dark. When I felt forgotten, I closed my eyes and listened for her. At 12, I entered the school science fair. I built a model of the human heart from cardboard and paint. It was simple, but I had studied every chamber and every valve with care. I explained how blood moved, how life depended on that steady rhythm. No one from my family came to see it. But my teacher did. She stood before my project with tears in her eyes and said, "You are going to change the world." I held her words as if they were made of gold. The attic walls slowly filled with certificates and small medals. Downstairs, my name was never mentioned. When I turned 14, I found weekend work at a local library. I cleaned shelves and stacked returned books, grateful simply to be near pages and quiet. The librarian, Mrs. Clark, noticed how often I lingered by the medical section. She began setting aside old textbooks for me, placing them in a small box behind her desk. "For your studies," she would say with a knowing smile. I read them at night under a blanket with a flashlight. Anatomy, diseases, treatments, stories of doctors who traveled to remote villages to heal strangers. Every page felt like a doorway. I woke before sunrise each morning, folded my blanket neatly, cleaned the attic, and walked to school with my books in a plastic bag. When rain soaked my clothes, I kept walking. When fever burned in my throat, I still sat in the front row. My cousins changed in different ways. They skipped classes and stayed out late. They returned home angry, blaming the world for their mistakes. My uncle excused them with tired shrugs. "Boys will be boys," he said. When trouble came, somehow I was the one punished. I washed dishes in silence and returned to my books. Mrs. Clark became more than a librarian. She listened when I spoke about my dreams. She corrected my essays and helped me practice interviews. "You have more than intelligence," she told me once. "You have compassion. Guard it. The world can make people bitter." Her faith steadied me when doubt tried to grow. In high school, I joined science clubs and wrote research papers beyond the requirements. I applied for a summer program at a medical center and was accepted after a nervous interview. It was my first time inside a real hospital. The scent of disinfectant filled the air. Machines hummed beside patients' beds. I began by mopping floors and carrying supplies, but I watched everything. One senior doctor observed my questions and my patience. He handed me books and tested my understanding. "Medicine is not only knowledge," he told me. "It is care. It is listening. It is understanding pain." I wrote his words in a small notebook and read them each night. At 17, a letter arrived offering me a full scholarship to a respected university. I held it carefully, afraid it might vanish. When I showed it to my uncle, he studied it for a long moment and said, "Doctors need money. We don't have that. Stop dreaming." I thanked him politely, returned to the attic, and packed my bag. Mrs. Clark drove me to the city. She hugged me tightly before I stepped onto campus. "Go change the world," she whispered. University was demanding. Students around me spoke confidently and moved with ease. I listened more than I spoke. I worked part-time jobs and volunteered at clinics on weekends. I met people from every background and learned that illness did not care about wealth or status. It touched everyone equally. I never forgot the attic. It reminded me why I was there. While I studied, my cousins drifted further from their path. Some dropped out of school. Others faced legal trouble. Occasionally, they sent messages asking for advice. I answered without resentment. Anger would have weighed me down. At 22, I graduated with honors. When my name was called, I walked across the stage with trembling hands. Mrs. Clark sat in the audience, applauding with tears on her cheeks. I thought of my parents and hoped they could see me. Medical training tested every part of me. Long nights in the emergency room taught me to act when seconds mattered. I practiced procedures until my hands stopped shaking. I learned to speak calmly even when fear rose inside. I discovered that sometimes the most powerful medicine was presence. One elderly patient once asked me to sit beside him. He had no visitors and no one left to call his name. I listened to his stories long after my shift ended. When he thanked me, I felt something settle deep within my chest. I understood then that healing meant more than prescriptions. Years passed in study and service. I completed medical school at the top of my class and joined a large hospital. People began calling me Dr. Noah. Titles never impressed me. I still cleaned my workspace and thanked every nurse and assistant. Pride can quietly erase compassion if left unchecked. My first surgery remains vivid in my memory. My hands trembled, but my focus was clear. I remembered my mother scrubbing floors to provide for me. I wished she could see me standing under bright lights, saving a life with steady hands. As my experience grew, so did my responsibilities. I led teams, trained younger students, and accepted an award for patient care. Letters from families described how they felt heard and respected. I kept those letters in a drawer, reading them when exhaustion threatened to dull my spirit. I began traveling to smaller towns where medical care was scarce. We opened clinics and offered free services to families who could not afford treatment. I told children there, do not stop dreaming. One day your pain will become strength. One evening, a boy handed me a folded note that read, "Thank you for saving my sister. I want to be like you." I placed that note beside my mother's photograph. Over time, I became a senior doctor. I encouraged my team to treat every patient with dignity. During one winter power outage, we used flashlights to continue working. A woman gave birth under dim light and later named her son after me. I stepped outside afterward and wept quietly, remembering how once no one had held my hand. Recognition came, but I remained focused on service. I saved carefully and purchased a small building, transforming it into a free clinic for children. Volunteers joined, laughter replaced silence, news stories spread, but I returned home each night thoughtful and humble. At the hospital, I met Elise, a nurse with calm eyes and a steady heart. We spoke over coffee and discovered shared values. She visited the clinic and played with the children as if she had known them forever. I proposed in the garden behind the building, surrounded by flowers grown by small hands. She said yes with tears of joy. We married quietly in spring. Later, we adopted 2 orphan girls. I saw my younger self in their cautious smiles. I promised them warmth and safety. Life settled into gentle rhythms. I walked to the clinic each morning, greeting neighbors. Patients brought apples and handwritten notes. A young boy once hugged me after passing his exams, saying I had inspired him. At night, Elise and I shared stories of the day. She often said that healing begins with listening. I agreed. Forgiveness, too, had healed me. My cousins eventually expressed pride in my achievements. I forgave them long ago, not for them, but to free my own heart. We opened a small school to teach science to underprivileged children. On Fridays, I told them my story. I explained that pain is not the end. It can become the beginning of purpose. Sometimes I still dream of my mother. She smiles without speaking. I wake with tears and whisper into the quiet room, I made it. I hope in some way beyond understanding, she hears me. From the cold attic to a warm home filled with laughter, my journey was never about revenge or recognition. It was about transforming suffering into service. I did not simply become a doctor. I became a man shaped by endurance, guided by compassion, and sustained by love. And every morning, as the sun rises gently over the hills, I carry that light forward, determined that no child who feels forgotten will remain unseen.